Welcome students. Welcome to the class. And the course you are studying is Animal Diversity 2 Biology of Chordates. And the instructor is Dr. Sneha, Assistant Professor, Department of Zoology, St. Joseph's College for Women, Vishakhapatnam. The topic is continuation of the previous class, the respiratory system of frog. In the previous class, we have discussed till buccopharyngeal respiration. So in this part 2, we will continue with the third type of respiration in frog, that is what? Pulmonary type of respiration. And the contents include respiratory system of frog, that means in terms in pulmonary respiration, pulmonary organs, and the breathing mechanism of pulmonary respiration. The learning outcomes includes you can explain the process by which frogs use their lungs for oxygen uptake and carbon dioxide release, highlighting the role of the buccal pump mechanism. You can understand how this mechanism supports efficient gas exchange in terrestrial environments. So we will start with pulmonary respiration. Respiration on land with the aid of lungs. This type of respiration is known as pulmonary respiration. In frogs, the lungs are very poorly developed. The intake of oxygen through the lungs alone is not actually sufficient for the frog's body. So that is the reason why the adult frogs are going to exhibit all the three different types of respiratory mechanisms, or all the three different types of respiratory modes, what we can say, that is with the help of skin, cutaneous respiration, with the help of buccal cavity, buccal respiration, and as well as with the help of lungs, that is what known as pulmonary respiration. As we can say, with the help of lungs, it can't meet its respiratory needs. So that is why frog is also going to relay the intake of oxygen through skin and with the help of the buccal cavity also to meet their respiratory needs. So here in this class, we're talking about pulmonary respiration. So the organs of pulmonary respirations are lungs. So the lungs are the chief organs for pulmonary respiration. So in frog, a pair of lungs are present, as we can see here in this diagram. A pair of lungs, almost all slight ovulation shape. So this type of lungs are actually present, and the respiratory tract, that is what the parts here we're talking about, lungs and the respiratory tract. So respiratory tract is the passage through which the air is going to enter and as well as exit back. So these are the parts of the pathway of respiratory tract. We can say the respiratory tract starts with external nostrils. That is what outermost nostrils what are present above to the mouth. Actually, it is followed. The external nostrils are going to opens into the next part. That is what nasal chambers. The nasal chambers further opens into the internal nostrils. These internal nostrils further going to open into a large cavity, that is what buccopharyngeal cavity. So on the floor of buccopharyngeal cavity, we can see a slit-like structure. The slit, that is what glottis. The glottis further opens into again a box-like structure, that is what larynx or laryngotracheal chamber. So this larynx further going to open into the leads into a tube-like structure, that is what bronchi, a pair of bronchi, and the bronchi are further going to ends in the oval-shaped sac-like structure, that is what lungs. So this is the structure of the parts which are present one after one or includes in the respiratory. The part what we are discussing now is larynx or laryngotracheal chamber. The median slit-like glottis, which is present on floor of the pharynx, that opens into a thin-walled chamber-like structure, the chamber which is known as larynx. its larynx walls are supported by cartilage. We will see in the next slide that two types of cartilages are present in the larynx chamber. That is what two arytenoid cartilages plus one cricoid cartilage is present. So the internal membranes of this laryngotracheal chamber is going to have a pair of elastic horizontal bands which are known as vocal cords, which actually are going to produce the sound. When the air from lungs is forced out between the vocal cords, it starts producing the characteristic frog sound here, which is known as croaking sound, that is going to be produced. So here in this diagram, we can see the presence of the slit-like structure on the floor of the pharynx near the buccopharyngeal cavity. This is what the glottis. So this glottis is going to further open into a chamber. So this is what known as larynx or laryngotracheal chamber. So as we already discussed that the thin walls of this chamber internally going to supported by two different types of cartilages, that is what a pair of arytenoid and one cricoid cartilage. And apart from that, can you see here the elastic bands actually what are present here? So these are nothing but the vocal cords. So that is what when the air is going to pass through this larynx, then what happens, the vibrations, this elastic vocal cords are going to start vibrating. Because of that vibration, what happens actually, that peculiar croaking sound of the frogs, high pitched volume of croaking sounds can be produced, and with the help of changing the air pressure, actually they can change the pitch of the croaking sound. That's what actually happens during the breeding season. And now we can see in this diagram also, see this larynx is further that means forming a pair of tube-like structures, that is what bronchi, which are going to lead into the next part, that is what the lungs. So we can see here in this picture a pair of lungs attached to the both the bronchi here. So the lungs are ovoid and thin-walled and highly elastic sac-like structures. They are externally covered by, we can see here, one more external layer is actually present. So this external layer which is present on the lungs, it is known as peritoneal layer. So could you see here the inner surface of each lung is again divided into a network of folds which they're going to form a very small tiny sac-like structures which are nothing but the alveoli. That's what we can clearly see in this diagram also. So now coming to the breathing mechanism. So the breathing mechanism of pulmonary respiration, again it involves both the steps, that is what inspiration, where oxygen is going to be taken inside, and exactly reverse, that is what expiration, where the carbon dioxide is going to be formed as a byproduct, is going to be come outside of the frog's body. So now we will see the inspiration and as well as expiration as a step-by-step mechanism. So first we are going to start with inspiration process, where this inspiration starts with the first step is the contraction of the sternohyoid muscles. So because of this contraction, what happens actually, the volume of the buccal cavity is going to increase. So because of this increase in buccal cavity, what happens, the pressure of air inside the buccal cavity decreases because the volume of the buccal cavity is increased. So that's why. So now because of this chain reaction, what happens now, the air flows into the cavity, the buccal cavity, through what, external nares. So now after air is going to enter, so now what happens? The submental muscles actually they're going to contract, moving the bones of the lower jaw. So because of this, the movement of the, that means moving the bones of lower jaw, then what happens, Amma? It results in the closing of the external nares. So now see in the next step what happens? The pterohyle muscles are going to contract. Because of this what happens? The volume of the buccopharyngeal cavity decreases, which is already filled with the air. So now since there is no escape route, because inside the buccal cavity it is decreased the space, and as well as external nostrils are already closed. So now because of no escape route, so now the glottis is going to be open. So now because of opening of the glottis, air is automatically flows into the lungs, where it going to where the air is going to ultimately enter into inside the alveoli, where gaseous exchange is going to be occur between the blood and as well as alveoli by simple diffusion. So this is how the inspiration is going to occur. So now moving to the expiration. So the same phenomena here we can see in this diagram, the both inspiration and as well as the expiration process. So now we will see exactly what happens in the expiration is the opposite phenomena to the inspiration steps are going to be happen. So now this process starts with what? The lungs and abdominal muscles are going to contract. So because of this contraction process, what happens? The lung volume decreases. Because of this decrease in lung volume, this causes what? Pressure inside within the lungs actually. So because of this, what happens now? The sternohyle muscles are going to contract. So now when the sternohyle muscles are going to contract, it causes the lowering of the floor and as well as increasing the buccal cavity volume. So now see the next step what happens. So now air pressure inside the buccal cavity decreases, because what happened here? The buccal cavity volume was increased. So automatically now what happens? Because the lungs have huge pressure, and where the air that is what present inside the lungs is huge. So now what happens? The air automatically flows into the lungs with the help of the opening of the glottis. So now what happens? The submental muscles are going to relax. So this causes what? The premaxilla are going to return into their original position. So this causes what actually? The opening of the external nares. So now again the pterohyle muscles are going to contract. So because of this again what happens? The buccal cavity's volume is going to decrease. So now where the air is actually present, it is present, that means the CO2, where it is present inside the buccal cavity. But because of the contraction of the pterohyle muscles, actually what happens? The buccal cavity volume decreased. So now what happens basically? The area is decreased and air pressure is basically increased. So now what happens? The glottis is going to closes. So because of this closing of the glottis, there is no other route is actually left over. So the air that is what present inside the buccal cavity, it has to go outside with the help of the opened external nares. So this is how the expiration, that means the CO2 that is what forms inside the lungs, it comes outside through the external nares. So now we will summarize the same process. Pulmonary respiration in frogs is crucial for their adaptation. That's what we already talked here. And the lungs of frogs are structured with numerous small chambers, that is what, and as well as a dense network of capillaries. The adaptation allows frogs to efficiently extract oxygen from the air, supporting the energy demands. And by specializing in pulmonary respiration, frogs have evolved to thrive in diverse terrestrial habitats. And these are the various references I cited for this topic. And thank you, girls, for listening the class.